Shabbat shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 25th of the first month as we comprehend it. Tomorrow being the 26th and the first fruits of the barley. The picture and the type of his presenting himself before the Father is the first fruits of the resurrection, where he went on high and took captivity captive and would later on give gifts to men, as it mentions in the Psalms, right? But it also lines up with April 4th, 2026 on the Gregorian calendar. And we're covering a little bit of a segue here on a topic about trees, roots, seeds, and what it all means in Scripture. So we had a little bit of a conversation before our fellowship got started this morning, and through the course of talking about things, different scriptures popped up that I thought we should share in regard to this topic. So the first one here is from Wayikra or Leviticus chapter 23, or I'm sorry, chapter 19, verse 23. And it's having to do with the instructions or the Torah in regard to fruit trees. So it says, when you come into the land and plant any kind of tree for food, then you shall regard its fruit as, it says forbidden here, but literally it is uncircumcised in the Hebrew. Okay? It says, for 3 years it shall be uncircumcised to you. It must not be eaten. And in the 4th year all its fruit shall be set apart, a set apart offering of praise to Yahuah. But in the 5th year you may eat of its fruit to the increase it yields for you. I am Yahuah your Elohim. And now we talked about it a little bit beforehand, but I'll just reiterate. If you look at our creation account parable video that we covered, the trees line up with the letter Kaf. And the letter Kaf means to be like or to resemble. It lines up with the time of Judges, and it was what we were supposed to be like and resembling is the fruit-bearing trees of the trees of the wood. He explains this in the times of Judges. You can see in the narrative of the history, they have parables about the swaying trees and this and that, alluding to the very times tied in with that parable. Now, the instructions here for us to be like a fruit-bearing tree, it mentions for the first 3 years, it's uncircumcised. And what you're supposed to do with the uncircumcised is to not mate with them and other things. There's all the instructions involved in it. I don't really want to get into detail. But the intent here is that as we're learning to become fruitful, those fruit are not fully developed and you're not supposed to partake of them yet. In the 4th year, it's Kadosh Yahuah, and then it can be partaken of. And that's the picture there. We might not have time to get into all the different pictures or all the different areas that are mentioned, but the fruits of the Ruach are in Ephesians and in the renewed covenant writings. It goes into detail about what those are. So the fact that we are to be like the trees, or the council of the community is like the cedars of Lebanon, which would be the trees of the wood, is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Psalms. I believe, uh, but the righteous is like a palm tree, he grows like a cedar in Lebanon. Those who are planted in the house of Yahuwah flourish in the courts of our Elohim. They bear fruit to old age, they are fresh and green, to declare that Yahuwah is straight, our rock, and in him is no unrighteousness. So there's these pictures there throughout the Psalms and other places. I'm not going to be able to point all of them out, but the idea that you are planted in his garden and a partaker of his house and of his things when he brings you in is something that you can read about in detail in what's called the Odes of Shalomo or the Odes of Solomon, which were not written by him. Thank you. Sister Rosie also shared Tehillim or Psalm chapter 1, where it mentions the contrast. Irenaeus goes into detail and explains the nuances of these three. I'll just cover it, but you can check in his Against Heresies for the information. It says Baruch, or Ashrei, prosperous, happy, is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wicked, meaning you're walking in sin, and shall not stand, or sorry, that's being ignorant, not knowing better, right? Or stand in the place of sinners. That's when you know to do right, but you don't do it. Or to sit in the seat of the scoffers, which the Septuagint version calls the pestilential. And Irenaeus explains that it's the ones that don't know better that do evil, is the first ones, that know better and still sin in the second ones, and then the third are those that not only do they still sin, but they are pernicious or pestilential in teaching others to follow after them, like a disease-ridden individual that infects those around them, right? It says, but his delight is in the Torah of Yahuah, and he meditates in his Torah Yom Walaila, day and night. He's thinking about these words so that he's intelligent in everything that he's doing. As mentioned in the book of Yahushua. I believe that's chapter 1, verse 8. There's a whole section there that's really worth reading there. To continue here, it says, for he shall be, the righteous one, as a tree planted by the rivers of water. And the rivers flowing come from the wisdom, springing up from the word, which are also parables that are alluded to throughout the scriptures. He's the fount of living waters, right? That yields its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers. So again, the righteous is equated to a tree here, whether the fruit-bearing trees or the tree of the wood, to which in the books of Yobelim and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it covers that there are 12 types of trees that were acceptable for offerings because the smoke of it ascends straight up. So there's a picture for these things. Um, as I was saying, the fact that you're brought into his house and planted in his garden when you're accepted by him, you can read plainly in the Psalms of Solomon, which were not written by Shalomo. It was two books that are kind of put together, the Odes of Solomon and the Psalms of Solomon. And I mixed those up, sorry. The Psalms were around the Maccabean period, and the Odes were written by a renewed covenant believer. And you can see the internal text for those. But I don't have either of them available here right now. That's why I mentioned it to you. The next place I did want to talk about, we were just covering, is right here in the book of Gad the Seer. This is chapter 8, and it gives you the definitions via his word of what the seed is, the root is, and other things like that. Now we know from the parable of parables that the seed is the word. Yahushua mentions that in his flesh, giving the parable explanation to his taught ones. And he says, if you don't know this parable, you can't comprehend any of them. When you take the seed as the word, you can literally go all the way back to the beginning, to the parable that he has from the creation account, where he says, I've done everything in parables. I speak only in parables from the foundations of the world. If you look at the book of Yobelim, you line up the 22 works there with the 22 letters of the alphabet and the 22 names of the patriarchs from Adam to Jacob and what their names mean, which we've done in a few videos before. We haven't gone into it in detail, but we've covered it. When you line them all up, you see this parable of all of his works through history until the millennial reign. And the 10th letter, the Yod, literally lines up with the seed, which lines up with the promises and the word that he gave to Abraham, with the covenant that he gave to Moshe, the word that he established by the working of his own hand. It's an amazing connection, and that work lines up with the um, the grass and all sprouting things. I believe, yeah, the seed and all sprouting things. So it's literally that work in creation. But right here, you get the definition of a few other ones, and there's a lot more here too. So we'll read this real quick. It says, "And Yahuwah appeared unto Dawid, or beloved, in the time of his old age, and said to him, Behold, I am with you, and I am your Elohim, and behold, my covenant is with you. Fear not, neither be dismayed, for your El is your helper. And Dawid bowed down to Yahuwah and rejoiced in his heart. And Yahuwah said, These are the words you will speak to the ears of the people in my name. So they will obey and they will live, for there will be no more anger on them. And that was the key. They were transitioning from the time of the cough to be like and resemble in the time of training into the Lamed, which lined up with the Garden of Eden, in Eden and all, and it lines up with the type of the millennial reign with Shalomo, all the way through to the training and the judgment, like the shepherd staff poking and prodding and goading, doing all the things that the Lamed in its meaning is meant to do. But it takes it from that period of like the time of the paradise in a foreshadow with Shalomo here, all the way through to the Maccabean period. Right? There's a long time where this lamenting or shepherding is seen. And then Mem is when he came, right? When the sun was manifested, the fourth day of creation. There might be a precursor to that, like whatever is manifested is light. So, and the death of his body happening, um, there's a lot more involved, so I don't want to confuse anybody. But there's a discrepancy from when he died and when he came in the history of the world here. We were learning about it a little bit, and this is kind of a segue, but I do want to point it out. We were learning about it when we went over this last week, and we were lining up the day's events. If you go through what he walked out each day, and then what happens in history until the millennial reign, it's an interesting parallel. His body dying right here is different from when he actually came, because he came in the fourth day, announcing his death until he returns. But this time in history was when his body was killed, not his physical, literal body that he came in, but the people of the kingdom to which he was, that was his body in the world, the truth inhabited in them, was killed when they were split off and the Assyrians came in, did their thing, and then Yahudah was taken into Babylon and returned. They were still under captivity, and we have been. The truth has not been in the world perfected like it was during that time with Shalomo here until he returns. So it walks out the history of the truth right here.
Hey, brother, that piece of oil or wood makes a lot of sense right now. If you look at those calendar dates
Right, right,
from the time that we start our first day of the week with our fasting, oh yeah, there's something there.
right. And
Right.
that's
And
another
that's
thing.
another thing.
Oh, we're getting some backward. There we go. There's another thing that we wanted to cover when we're going over this too. The brother John Chris, he pointed it out. He'd mentioned that this offering also lines up with the fasting that we're supposed to do during the Pesach is representative of walking out what our Mashiach did as well. And he thinks that there's a parallel here with the offerings and how that was played out in history, where you have two tribes each day who are supposed to bring in their wood, and there might be a significance with their names tied in with the day in history and what that represents.
The one that gets me is the oil.
Right.
That's when he first came in, and he was going back and forth with the Pharisees and everything. It's like almost like the oil being poured out, and
Right.
then the suffering and the offering starts.
Exactly. And oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to, that time, if you read about what he does on the first day, he gives a massive amount of information. He's preaching first to the people there, and then he goes to his own, and then he even goes to the his taught ones separately, and he gives them more and more and more full revelation by the end of that day of all that was going to go happening. And I mean here. But that's the same thing as at the end of this first day, Hanok was the first one to get wisdom. All of these things were revealed to him literally. He was given all of what would happen in the animal apocalypse, although we don't have that full thing today. And he even foretold that they would tamper with his writings. But that was all first day in the same way that he did that preaching and ministering that first day right here. A really amazing parallel that I didn't notice until this year looking at it. And
Yeah,
brother,
and I just saw that, so I was like, okay, that's like the oil being poured out
mhm,
to the people and his followers.
right. So we're going to go over this part too, just to cover that, because all of these things are significant. He's walked out the appointed times through history. It's one way that we can keep track of what was going on. And we talked about it before. He made all of creation in the beginning by Pesach and the walking out of these things. It was literally the Exodus that they partook of. The first fruits and afterwards Abib time was the time of Judges, where you have the example like Gideon. The dream that the Midianite had was that a barley loaf was rolling down into the tent. Not just the Abib barley, but after that, where you can have a loaf of bread. However, it was before the wheat harvest. And this full two bread offering of the wheat harvest was given as Shavuot for the renewed covenant when the Ruach was poured out. That's explained in the apostolic constitutions. So after that time, you have the martyrdoms and the different ways that that plays out, and that's the significance that Brother John believes is right here together. So we're going to check that out in the temple scroll as well. And thank you for pointing that out. So right here it says, "And Yahuwah put his words in his David's mouth. Then David assembled all Yisrael in Yerushalayim, and he made to himself a pulpit of wood, and he stood upon it before all the people. And he opened his mouth and said," now that's a significant, you don't find that phraseology anywhere but one place, the Sermon of the Mount. That's the only other place where I find it. And he opened his mouth and said, right? But right here it says, "Hearken, Yisrael, your Elohim and my Elohim is one, the only one and unique. There is no one like his individuality, hidden from all. He was and is and will be. He fills his place, but his place doesn't fill him. He sees but is not seen. He tells and knows futures. For he is El without end, and there is no end to his end. Omnipotent, meaning all powerful. El of truth. Whole worlds are full of his honor or esteem, and that would be this world and the world to come, not multiple planets in an ever enlarging galaxy or whatever. That's nonsense.
And glory in the most highest esteem.
What's that, brother?
And glory in the most highest esteem.
Yes. Says, "And he gave each one free choice, freedom of will. If one wants to do tov, he will be helped. And if one wants to do evil, a path will be opened for him. For that we will worship our Elohim, our King, our Master, our Deliverer with love and awe." He's called the awe of Yitzhak, right? And you'd wonder, well, how is he his awe? Awe used to, in we were supposed to be worshiping in fear and trembling, right? Awe used to be a word that was it was rooted in the idea that you were dumbstruck with fear almost, and not just like veneration. It was more of an archaic meaning, but that awe of Yitzhak was because he was offered, he was told to be a sacrifice, you know. He was not the awe of Abraham or Jacob, but he was the awe of Yitzhak. says, for your hokmah is the fear of Yahuwah, your wisdom. And remember, the word hokmah in Hebrew means the hok is the palate, and ma means what. So it's tasting. Hok, it literally means to chew up dates and put it on the palate of a child so they can taste food and get a desire for eating, and it's to wean a child with the hok, right? But the hokmah is to taste and see what is good for you in the essence of its word. That's only given from above. You can't have it in any other way. But he says, and your wisdom or hokmah is the fear of Yahuwah, and your cleverness, that is aram, or to perceive that which is high and exalted, is to depart from evil. Remember and obey the Torah of Moshe, man of Elohim, that it may be well with you all the days. Ask your fathers, and they will declare unto you, your elders, and they will tell you. Be strong and valiant to obey the Torah, and not to hear it only, because faith or belief without works is dead. And what happens to a dead tree? It gets dug up by the roots if it's not profitable after he slung poop and dug up around it for a while, right? And made life uncomfortable and stinky. If you still won't bear fruit after that, it gets uprooted. He says, be strong and valiant to obey the Torah and not to hear it only. For a deed is like a root. Hearing, hearing it is like a seed, and belief is like a tree. So if the deed is a root and belief is a tree, you can't have belief without the deed, without doing the thing and having it take root.
Therefore, there are no Nazarene. You are not.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And the fruit is like righteousness. And what shall we do to a smelly and stinky seed if no root will come out of, or if the root will not come out of it? Right, that's the question. That's answered by Yahushua and by Yahukanan the immerser. He says the axe is already laid to the root, right? For that, hurry up, be quick, and act. Hear and act. And this is what Kepha says.
Shema. Shema.
When, go ahead.
Shema. Shema. Israel.
Yes, Shema. The word in Hebrew, Shema, means hear, believe, and do in its essence. It's what Shimon's name, Simeon, right? Shemaun, comes from. The other word there, like this word hearken, this word means to bend the ear and to be attentive. But it comes from the word hearken in Hebrew, which literally means to ponder and to lean into. It's not the same, but it's the word that we carried down into English. We don't use Shema anymore. It essentially takes that meaning, but the Shema is the important one. It has to accompany with the doing of it. And that's what has your belief flourish like a tree. The Ruach being in you, producing the fruits, is only if you do it. And that is a free choice thing, right? And it says, I already read that part. It says, for that, hurry up, be quick and act, hear and act, for you are a true seed. For you have belief and righteousness, and Yahuwah will barak or bless you in shalom. And they did. After his death, the people, there was no more anger against them. They walked hurrying to do his deeds, and it was a type of the millennial reign before it happened, a world rule where there was peace. Shlomo had all the kings of the world paying homage to him, or, of the land in that area. From Britain all throughout the Middle East, they paid homage to him. Whether people, I could say as far as the Americas, because we have evidence of the Hebrews in the North and South America for mining copper and gold and other things. Brazil means iron in Hebrew. Peru is fruitful in Hebrew. And there's even writings talking about Shalomo going to South America where it was called Ophir.
The
There's a
Sephardic,
book,
Sephardic, I believe they're of the what they call them the Sephardic line, I believe.
yes.
Yes.
Tatafi also
Taffy
covered
also
that.
covered that. Yeah, my time down in South America and then Mexico or Mexico, I saw areas that had they'd wear talits and blow shofars.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
So just for context for them, in the book of Tatafi, it mentions that Gad was familiar with South America and was wanting to go there. And Gad, being of Spain, also he had influence with the conquistadors throughout South America and in the Philippines. But before then, you also had Hebrews that had migrated and traveled around all that area. The largest island of the Philippines was named after the white bearded Phoenician merchants that would go through. I don't know if you all were familiar with that, but that was the truth that I know of, and that was all the way back 1000 BC to the times right after this, when the the children were walking in obedience, quickly doing what they knew to do, and it was well with them. This is talk shalom, each one with another, bearing the fruits of the Ruach, right? And love the deed and those created in the image of Yahuah like your own inner beings. For if you love the creation, it is a sign that you love the Creator. And also, you should take hold of the one, yea, also from the other, withdraw not your hand. Love Yahuah, and also man, that it shall be well with you all the days. And this is the it's what was from the beginning, and it was renewed in him and in you, because the darkness is now fading away and the light, the true light, now shines, right? It's explained in First John or Yahukanan Aleph explicitly that to love our Creator is to love our fellow man by guarding his commands and not having them be a burden. You might ask, which commands? Well, the ones that he said, until heaven and earth pass away, my word won't either. So he wants us to be um, kadosh, separate in mind, thought, word, deed.
His
He
yoke is
separated
not
his
burdensome.
children for these purposes, right?
His yoke is not burdensome.
Not at all.
Not at all.
It's meant to be a blessing to you. And when you cut out all that stuff and you don't put evil before your eyes and you literally do the things he said, it turns on the switch for his blessings to be in effect in your life. Because he's trustworthy even when we're not, right? He says, and Dawid raised up his hands or sorry, his voice rather, and his hands spread forth toward the Shamayim. So now he's on the pulpit. So he's on the wood above all the people with his hands spread out. And he says, Yahuwah Elohim, the El of the Ruachoth, or spirits of all flesh, Elohim merciful and favorable, guard Yisrael forever. Deliver your people and Barak your inheritance, and tend them and carry them forever. And that was going to lead to the Lamed in history. Okay, which we just kind of alluded to, the creation account parable, the times of the Lamed or the shepherding. And all the people called out, Amen, Amen. And Dawid sent the people away, and they went home in shalom. All right. And then there was one more that really came to mind when our brother was first talking about that, and I shared it, or I looked it up on here. It's actually a Thanksgiving hymn from the Dead Sea Scrolls, because he was talking about how they had to be planted by the waters. So this came to mind. I'm sure you're going to see that as soon as we read. But what waters, not all trees are by this root. There is a difference. And if you're nourished by Him, then you'll receive the benefits. I don't expect that everyone can just instantly grasp everything that is shared in this video as we're going over it, but I do want you to take the time to consider these things. Think about what it means. Think about the things we said. Prove them for yourself. Look up what it says in His Word about the definitions of what they are, and then think about it and see if it isn't true. But this is Hem 18 from the Complete Scrolls edition, the Penguin edition that was originally released in 1991. The new translation has a different order for some of these. And as you can see, the order had already previously been rearranged by someone before this was even published. The reason for that is because these documents were in fragments. They're not just a solid scroll that could be unfolded and read. It's literally scattered pieces of fragmented paper, some of them in larger pieces than others, that men have painstakingly tried to put back together in the order that it's supposed to be. But men aren't perfect, so it's prone to mistakes. However, um, I'm sure you can see when we read through this that what we've talked about goes right in line. So it says, I thank you, Yahuwah, for you have placed me beside a fountain of streams in an arid land, and close to a spring of waters in a dry land, and beside a watered garden in a wilderness. And his Zion was the well-watered garden in the desert. It's mentioned by Ezra in 4th Ezra, I believe, or they're in his discussing things and praying to Yahuwah and talking about them.
Yeah, it was fourth.
Thank you. It says, For you did set a plantation of cypress, pine, and cedar for your glory or esteem, trees of life, beside a mysterious fountain hidden among the trees by the water. And they put out a shoot of the everlasting plant. Now, that everlasting plant is explained in, I believe it's in the book of Yobelim, but it's alluded to in a few different places. And it is the plant of righteousness that he himself planted and labored over. But before they did so, they took root and sent out their roots to the watercourse, that its stem might be open to the living waters, and be one with the everlasting spring. And all the beasts of the forest fed on its leafy boughs. Its stem was trodden by all who passed on the way, and its branches by all the birds. And all the trees by the water rose above it, for they grew in their plantation. But they sent out no root to the watercourse. And the bud of the shoot of set apartness of the plant of truth was hidden and was not esteemed, and being unperceived, its mystery was sealed. And this is the only explanation in any part of Scripture of what a seal is. The mystery being unperceived, it is sealed. So you take that meaning and go back to Revelation, and it explains that the seals are being opened. That's something that was already done, that was hidden and not perceived, but it was now being opened for their benefit. And if you look at the Antichrist for Dummies, you watch the first part of that series that covers the seal judgments being revealed. It's literally covering past events that had already transpired before 90 AD when the book was written. It was a way to get the book kickstarted to learn how to interpret what was being read or written to you, and then seeing it in the stars, finding out the corresponding events, and learning how to interpret the book of Revelation. But that whole thing was sealed and then being opened because it was things that had already happened before with the destruction of the land in 70 AD, and then culminating with the explosion of the Vesuvius with the volcano they call Pompeii when Pompeii was destroyed. I believe that was 79 AD, but that was the sixth seal judgment there, where it talks about all that colorful, every island being moved out of its place and everything, and all the scenery and the imagery that you get there literally happened when the Vesuvius exploded and destroyed that 200,000 square miles.
Yeah, and it took out all of their vacation places where the Romans would hang out, and that was
Specifically,
yeah,
yeah, they're Roman soldiers on leave.
yeah.
So it says, "You did head in its fruit, O Eloah, with the mystery of the mighty heroes and the spirits or Ruach oath of set apartness and of the whirling flame of fire, which was preventing people from the way to the tree of life. No man shall approach the wellspring of life or drink the waters of set apartness with the everlasting trees or bear fruit with the plant of Shamayim, who seeing has not discerned, and considering has not believed in the fountain of life." So remember, belief is like a tree, and the deed is like the seed or the root. So you have to do it to believe. And if you don't do, you can't comprehend. And if you can't comprehend, you will not discern things correctly. We were talking about how it's a catch-22. There is no way that you can circumvent your creator. You are not more powerful. I am not more powerful. We can't do things in a different manner and expect him to just be okay with it. So if he said you have to do this to get comprehension, there is no way under in any other circumstances that we can fully comprehend the truth until we do the things he told us to. And Kepha explains that whatever's preventing, whatever remnant of error you still hold in you, that's the foothold that demons have to delude you. It says, "Who has turned his hand against the everlasting bud," meaning the deeds you're doing are contrary to the truth here, right? "And I was despised by tumultuous rivers." The waters are the peoples, languages, tribes, and tongues. "For they cast up their slime upon me. But you, my Elohim, have put into my mouth, as it were, rain for all those who thirst, and a fount of living waters which shall not fail. When they are opened, they shall not run dry. They shall be a torrent overflowing its banks, and like the bottomless seas." Sirach describes it as well, where he wanted a little wisdom for himself. He opened a little fountain, and it became of outflowing like an ocean tide that he could not contain. And it was not just for himself, but for the benefit of anyone who would hear those words. "They shall suddenly gush forth, which were hidden in secret, and shall be like the waters of the flood to every tree, both the green and the barren. To every beast and bird they shall be an abyss. The trees shall sink like lead in the mighty waters. Fire shall burn among them, and they shall be dried up." Now, you can find another reference to these things in, I believe it is Second Baruch, and he has a parable of the end times with the vine and the waters and the trees that are like the cedars or the forest of trees, which happens to represent the Roman Empire or that fourth beast system that still reigns. But he says, if they do this to the living tree, what will they do to the barren? And he speaks about, look, if they do this to the green, speaking about him, the living one, the green and fruitful tree, if they do this to him, what shall they do to the barren? Right? "The tree shall sink like lead in the mighty waters. Fire shall burn among them, and they shall be dried up. But the fruitful plant by the everlasting spring shall be an Eden of honor, an Eden of glory, bearing fruits of life." By my hand you have opened for them a wellspring and ditches, that all their channels may be laid out according to a certain measuring cord, and the planting of their trees according to the plumb line of the sun, the Shemesh, which is the word for sun, but it also means the steadfast servant who runs his course. That their boughs may become a beautiful branch of esteem. When I lift my hand to dig its ditches, its roots shall run deep into hardest rock, and its stems it breaks off in the earth. In the season of heat it shall keep its strength, but if I take away my hand, it shall be like a thistle in the in the wilderness. Its stem shall be like nettles in the salty land. And thistles and thorns shall grow from its ditches, and brambles and briars. Its border trees shall be like wild grapevine, whose foliage withers before the heat, and its stem shall not be open to the spring. So a wild grapevine isn't pruned and it withers more. Otherwise, he says, to those that bear fruit, he prunes, and then it bears more fruit, right? Behold, I am carried away with the sick. I am acquainted with scourges. I am forsaken in my sorrow, breaks off, and without any strength. For my sore breaks out in bitter pains and in incurable sickness, impossible to stay. My heart laments within me, as in those who go down to the grave. It says hell here, and hell comes from the same root as a hole. It was originally a hole in the ground, or Sheol is the grave, the place of the dead. My ruach is imprisoned with the dead, for my life has reached the pit. My inner being languishes within me, day and night without rest. My wound breaks out like burning fire shut up in my bones, whose flames devour me for days on end, diminishing my strength for times on end, and destroying my flesh for seasons on end. The pains fly out towards me, and my soul within me languishes, even to death. The strength is gone from my body, and my heart runs out like water. My flesh is dissolved like wax, and the strength of my loins is turned to fear. My arm is torn from its socket, and I can lift my hand no more. My foot is held by fetters, and my knees slide like water. Now, this is a picture of the man writing this. He's just like Dawid when he wrote his psalms. They generally were about the things he was going through, and there's a picture of the sufferings of our Mashiach in these things, if you can see it. His feet being stuck, his arms torn from his socket when he was hanging there,
The one that
right?
got me was the sliding on your knees.
Right. That's
Right.
what
It's when you're in your most humble part and you're on your knees and it feels like you're just moving.
and he did
And
that
he
in the
did that in
garden.
the garden.
He
Yeah. He
also
also
literally when you're hanging suspended there, you cannot hold yourself up. You'll suffocate or you'll drown if you don't. But that was another meaning of that. And when he was already passed, if you recall, they did not break his bones because he was already dead. The others, they broke them so they couldn't support themselves anymore and they would die quicker. It says, the tongue has gone back. My point in sharing this part, it's tied in with this, it's all together, but you have this idea of this wonderful truth, the everlasting springs, and then this suffering. All this suffering is because we rejected him. All this suffering is what we have done to the truth. That doesn't have to be that way anymore. But let's continue real quick. Sorry about that. It says, "My strength is gone from my body, and my heart runs out like water. My flesh is dissolved like wax, and the strength of my loins is turned to fear." There we go. So we were right over here. It says, "I can no longer walk. I cannot step forward lightly, for my legs and arms are bound by shackles which cause me to stumble. The tongue has gone back, which you did make marvelously mighty within my mouth. It can no longer give voice. Right? I have no word for my disciples to revive the ruach of those who stumble and to speak words of support to the weary. My circumcised lips are dumb. For the throes of death encompass me, and hell is upon my bed. My couch utters a lamentation, and my palate the sound of a complaint. My eyes are like fire in the furnace, and my tears like rivers of water. My eyes grow dim with waiting, for my salvation is far from me, and my life is apart from me. But behold, from desolation to ruin, and from the pain to the sore, and from the travail to the throes, my soul meditates on your marvelous works. In your loving kindness you have not cast me aside. Season by season, my nephesh shall delight in the abundance of mercy. I will reply to him who slanders me, and I will rebuke my oppressor. I will declare his sentence unrighteous, and declare your righteous or your judgment righteous. For I know by your truth, and I choose your judgment upon me. I delight in my scourges, for I hope for your loving kindness or your mercy. This word, it's translated unmerited, tender, loving kindness right here. It, Bill Barrick translates it as covenant love, and it's usually, they'll translate hesed as mercy quite often in the original scriptures, but it has a lot of meaning to it, okay? It's his mercy, it's his loving kindness, his covenant love that he's talking about in these regards, right? For I hope for your mercy. You have put a supplication in the mouth of your servant, and you have not threatened my life, nor rejected my shalom. You have not failed my expectation, but have upheld my ruach in the face of the scourge. For it is you who have founded my ruach, and you know my intent. In my distress you have comforted me. I delight in forgiveness, and I am consoled for the former transgression. For I know that there is hope in your favor and expectation in your great power. For no man can be declared right in your judgment or righteous in your trial. Though one man may be more righteous than another, one person more wise than another, one mortal more esteemed than another creature of clay, yet is there no power to compare with your might. There is no bound to your esteem, and to your wisdom no measure. To your truth there is no, and it breaks off, and all who forsake him breaks off, and my oppressors shall not prevail against me. I will be a stumbling block to those who swallow me up, and a snare to all those who battle against me. I will be for my enemies a cause of shame, and a cause of dishonor to those who murmur against me. For you, my Eloah, breaks off, you will plead my cause, for it is according to the mystery of your wisdom that you have rebuked me. Now, in regard to our Mashiach, he mentions that in Gad the Seer chapter 2, it was because he mixed the impure with the pure, that all these things were going to happen to him. But because he stood in that position and he was the light of the world all the time that he was meant to be a shepherd to them, and he suffered as the lamb despised and rejected, because he was trustworthy in that, all of the honor and esteem would happen to him. He was given the name above every name. He was taken and placed at the right hand of the Almighty. All the benefits and promises that were fulfilled were yes and amen in him because he was trustworthy. But it says right here, it is according to the mystery of your wisdom that you have rebuked me. You will conceal the truth until its time, and righteousness until its appointed moment. Your rebuke shall become my joy and gladness, and my scourges shall turn to eternal healing and everlasting shalom. By his wounds, by his stripes we are healed, right? The scorn of my enemies shall become a crown of honor or esteem, and my stumbling shall change to everlasting might. For in you, it breaks off, and my light shall shine forth in your esteem. For as a light from out of the darkness, so will you enlighten me. For you will bring healing to my wound, and marvelous might to the place of my stumbling, and everlasting space to my straitened soul. For you are my refuge. It says that the refuge of the poor, the refuge of the Mashiach, is the name of Yahuwah. We've talked about that before. You are my refuge, my high mountain, my stout rock, and my fortress. In you will I shelter from all the designs of unrighteousness. And he's the truth, right? For you will succor me or succor me with eternal deliverance. For you have known me from the time of my father, and have chosen me from the womb. From the belly of my mother you have dealt kindly with me, and from the breast of her who conceived me, your mercies have been with me. Your favor was with me in the lap of her who reared me, and from my youth you have illumined or enlightened me with the wisdom of your judgment. You have upheld me with certain truth. You have delighted me with your Ruach HaKodesh, and have opened my heart till this day. Your righteous rebuke accompanies my faults, and your safeguarding shalom delivers my inner being. The abundance of forgiveness is with my steps, and infinite mercy accompanies your judgment of me. Until I am old, you will care for me, for my father knew me not, and my mother abandoned me to you. For you are a father to all the sons of your truth, and as a woman who tenderly loves her babe, so do you rejoice in them. And as a foster father bearing a child in his lap, so you care for all your creatures. Amen. So just one moment, and I will find the temple scroll, and we'll cover the one part in there with the wood offerings and probably wrap it up from there. So please just give me one moment. All right, shalom again, everyone. This is from the study edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are three main editions that I have that we go through. There are more translations, like the Discoveries of the Judean Desert is the largest compilation of all of them. There's multiple volumes of scholarly work that go through each bit, fragment, scrap, and translate and talk about it. I don't have that. That's something that costs a lot of money that I'd like to get, but I just don't have available. I do have the two-volume study edition, which we have a PDF of right here, and it takes each individual scroll and translates it. And then we have the new translation in a hard copy, which generally gives you a compilation of the all the scrolls that are on the same topic and gives you a full version translation generally, which I appreciate. And then they have the Penguin edition, which was the original publication of it in 1991 that has some differences. It's not complete. It doesn't have all the scrolls that you can find in the later ones, for example. But that's neither here nor there. This is from what is called the Temple Scroll. It's 11QT, 4QT, 11Q20, and a few other designations as well. So I don't want to detract from any of that, but I do want to just point out it's covering the building of the Hikkel and different things, and then how to do the offerings in what days at what time. It starts with the beginning of the month on the first of the first month, walks all the way through the 14th of the first month in the keeping of Passover, the keeping of first fruits, and then the counting until you get to the wave sheaf offering, and then another counting until you would do the next offering, excuse me, and then you would do a third counting for when you would get up to the wine, or sorry, this was the next counting for the wine, and then another counting for the oil and the wood. And that's the one that we want to cover right here for our purposes, with the wood relating to the fruit-bearing trees and the trees of the wood there. Fruit-bearing trees were prohibited by the people to cut up to make siege engines for war, but the other trees were for that use. So, and these are all things or pictures that to teach us things if you can think about them. All right. Excuse me, I want to get to the right spot here. All right, and then it says, so there's a blank, it breaks off in this particular version. They just got done talking about the wine celebration, and then this is now going into the, oh no, this is the wine celebration. After they give their thanks and they do their offerings, they were going to drink, and it's the Kohen first and then the people. So sorry about that. After that, you have this blank, and then it says, from this day you shall count off for yourselves 7 times 7 weeks. There will be 49 days, 7 full weeks, up to the day after the seventh Sabbath. You shall count off 50 days, and you shall offer new oil from the dwelling places of the clans of the sons of Yisrael. Each one of the clans half a hin refined new oil, and they shall offer the first of the oil over the altar, the burnt offering of the first fruits before Yahuwah. And then it breaks off here, and it's going into the what was to be offered for the whole assembly, and the instructions for that. Anytime you had animals, it would always be accompanied with the flour and the wine. For each animal, there was a portion, and the the spices that were to be mixed with it as well, salt included. And I'm mixing that up. The spices were for the fragrance for the ascending offering, the I'm not saying it right, the frankincense and whatnot, for a pleasing aroma, but it was also salt on the meat for its offering as well. So thank you for that. Um, I don't really want to read that part. It's broken up. And they shall burn this oil in the lamps. And that was the purpose of it. The oil that was brought in was meant to be used for the menorah, right? The heads of the thousands of the princes, and this is what they're supposed to offer, 14 lambs of their offerings. These things, which if we get a chance, we'll go into with more detail. I believe that the instructions for what was offered here and the evidence of what we see offered at certain times is a type or a parable of the martyrdoms and the offerings of his people, his body, after he came in history. You can see precursors of it with the Maccabean period, and then you can see a lot more detail after he came. Um, but what all these represent in nuance would take a lot of time to go over. What I would encourage everyone to do is go over the book of Hanok, and in particular the animal apocalypse as it is called, and that's where you get your first definitions of the animals as related to men and who they are. So you don't have to go beyond what's there to see how animals are depicted everywhere else through scripture.
Hey, brother, something just kind of dawned on me. Well, not really, but I mean, something I'm thinking about for a while. Um, when we're ending this feast of wood, right? We have wine, we have oil, wood, and we were trying to, look at with the Passion Week. Of course, what's our next feast day after the wood? Isn't it Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets? It's almost like the oil's poured out. We fast. There's the sacrifice, obviously, because we give an ascending offering, and it matches up with what our Mashiach did. And then our next feast day would, when he rises and then completes the fall feast, it's the coming of the king. So it's like the oil's been poured out. The wine, there's his blood, there's the oil, there's the wood of the sacrifice, and then we get our next feast day is going to be Yom Teruah, the coming of the king on his fall feast days. Now, I don't know how that coincides, but it kind of seems, yeah, it might be a thing.
So, is it first fruits tomorrow?
Yes, brother. Sorry about that. I was muted. I'd been trying to talk about something too. But yes, first fruits is tomorrow. We have the 26th tomorrow here. And that's the first counting of our Omer, where we count 50 days until we get to Shavuot, right? But it mentions in Yirmiyahu chapter 38 of the Septuagint translation that the greater Exodus, when he is bringing all the children back again, it's going to be on Passover that he starts that. Just like the Exodus was in Passover here, you're going to have that recapitulated. But I think you're absolutely right. We might walk that out, and that's where it talks about there's foretellings. I believe it's in Hosea. It might be somewhere else, but he says when he brings us back, he's going to bring us all out into the wilderness, but he will purge the rebels from us, and they will die before he brings us into the land. And I do believe if we are coming in and being removed on a Passover, that purging is we're going to be walking out all the stuff like the children did, and those that grumble and complain like they did and before, it's going to be purging all the rebels until we get to right here. You have the trumpet, the announcement, you have the Yom HaKippurim, and this is where all men turn their hearts back to him, and things will start to change. And then we have the millennial reign, the temporary dwellings with him, the sukkim, the sukkoting with him in temporary dwellings, right? A picture of it right here, where it's not the forever after. We still have time afterwards. There's even events that go on here if you look at stuff, but this would be where we reign with him as kings and priests for 1,000 years, right? The type and picture in the festivals.
Yeah, and even if you look back at your other calendar, yeah, go back and with our Feast of Wood, right? So we're doing the same thing we did in the Passion Week, okay? And then let's take it down. So our next feast is the Yom Teruah, okay, the coming of the King, and then we're doing the same, almost the same thing. Yeah, kind of, yeah. And then you have our Day of Atonement is the same day that Mashiach rose in the morning. So it's like we're pouring out, we're in our Day of Atonement, and he rises, and then, or I don't, that just lines up to me in a different way.
Good brother.
Hey, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to
I
finish
want
reading
to
that
finish
one real
reading that
quick if
one
we
real quick if
can,
we can.
so
Yeah.
we
So
can get.
we can get.
How come there's an echo when John's mic is on?
I don't know, brother. Just happening.
I couldn't say, brother. I only got one. Got my iPad. So, oh, that's my JBL speaker. That's what it is.
Hmm.
All right, here I turn it off.
There you go. Actually, you picked up your voice a lot better too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had the loudspeaker on just so we could hear it.
Where's Brother Earl?
He left a while ago.
We lost it. Let me finish reading and we can wrap up the recording, okay? It says, and the sons of Louis shall slaughter it breaks off, and the Kohanim, the sons of Aharon, shall sprinkle their blood upon the altar all around, and they shall burn their flesh and their fat over the altar of the burnt offerings, according to the regulation, and their offerings, and their libations. They shall burn over the fats, it breaks off, a fire sacrifice of fragrance, which appeases Yahuwah. And they shall set aside from the rams and from the lambs the right leg and the breasts of the wave offering, and the choicest part of the shoulder blade, the jawbones and the stomach. It shall be for the Kohanim as a share in accordance with their regulations. And for the Luiim, the upper foreleg. Afterwards they shall take them out of the children of Israel, or to the children of Israel. And the children of Israel shall give the Kohanim one ram and one lamb, and to the Luiim one ram and one lamb, and to each clan one ram and one lamb. The rams representing the leader, right? And they shall eat them on this day in the outer courtyard before Yahuwah. Eternal precepts for the generations year after year. Afterwards they shall eat, and they shall anoint themselves with the new oil and with the olives, because on this day they shall atone for all the oil of the land before Yahuwah once a year, and they shall rejoice. And it says, and all the sons of Yisrael in their dwelling places, it breaks off. It says, and after the festival of oil they shall offer the 12 tribes of the sons of Yisrael the wood for the altar. And they shall offer on the first day the tribes of Lui and Yahudah. And on the second day, Benjamin and the sons of Yahusuf, or that'd be Ephraim and Manasseh, the double portion there. And on the third day, Reuben and Shimon. And on the fourth, Yishakar and Zebulun. And on the fifth, Gad and Asher. And on the sixth day, Dan and Naphtali. They shall offer on the festival of the wood a burnt offering for Yahuwah. And it breaks off. You have a double lispis here, and it went from line 3 to line 4, so it's no telling how much text is missing between these two, just to be perfectly honest with you. It says 2 he-goats, 4, and there's a double break there, and their offering and their libation according to the regulation. It is a burnt offering, a fire sacrifice of fragrance appeasing to Yahuwah, or as it mentions in the scriptures, a sweet smelling fragrance before Yahuwah, right? Acceptable before him. 1 bullock, 1 ram, 1 yearly, or 1 lamb a year old, without blemish, for each one of the tribes of the 12 sons of Jacob. It breaks off. And they shall prepare them on the 4th quarter of the day over the altar, after their perpetual burnt offering and its libation. The high Kohen will offer the burnt offering of the Luiim first, and after it he will burn the burnt offering of the tribe of Yahudah. When he is burning it, they shall first slaughter the he-goat before him, and he shall take its blood to the altar in a sprinkling bowl, and he shall put some of its blood with his finger on the 4 horns of the altar of the burnt offering and of the 4 corners of the enclosure of the altar. And he shall pour out its blood over the base of the enclosure of the altar round about. And remember, putting the blood on the corners there and pouring it out round about, there was different pictures here, but all of those point to the illusion of what happened with our Mashiach and the culmination of all the offerings was his offering of himself, to which you can get the best detail by studying what Ron Wyatt shared about what was revealed when he discovered where the Ark of the Covenant was. Literally, his blood when the earthquake happened and the Roman centurion stabbed him and the blood and water came out, it poured down through the crack and the hole in the ground that was formed onto the broken stone that was opened by a messenger, onto the Ark of the Covenant, just as it was supposed to be the blood offerings on the altar. It was accomplished all around it and on it, as it mentions here. And these were done as a foreshadow of that event. There's no other reason for them sprinkling blood and splashing it around and doing those kind of things, but a type of what was to come with his offering. And I think that is absolutely amazing. You can't make that stuff up. But either way, right here, we'll finish. And he shall burn its fat on the altar, the fat of which covers the intestines and what is over the entrails, and the lobe of the liver with the kidneys he shall remove, and the fat which is over them, and which is over the loins. And he will burn everything upon the altar with its offering and its libation. It is a fire sacrifice, a fragrance which appeases Yahuwah. All right, it goes on, breaks up a little bit here, but it talks about how they shall do this for the bullock and for each ram and for each lamb, and cut, and its cuts will be separated, and its offerings and its libation on top of it. Eternal precepts, or precepts unto ages, because olam doesn't mean forever, it means unto ages, literally. It says, for your generations before Yahuwah. And after this burnt offering, he will offer the burnt offering of the tribe of Yahudah separately, as he did with the burnt offering of the Luiim, so shall he do with the burnt offering of the sons of Yahudah after the Luiim. And on the second day he will offer first the burnt offering of Benjamin, or the son of my right hand. Lui means those joined unto me. Yahudah is he who confesses, praises, and acknowledges Yahuwah. Benjamin is the son of my right hand, or the son of ages, or the son of my old age. Yahusuf is Yahuwah will gather or accumulate, right? Which is together with Ephraim and Manasseh, which is the fruitful and the forgetful. But he says, and he will offer the burnt offering of the sons of Yahusuf together with Ephraim and Manasseh, and on the third day he will offer the burnt offering of Reuben separately, and the burnt offering of Shimon separately. And on the fourth day he will offer the burnt offering of Yishakar separately, and the burnt offering of Zebulun separately. And on the fifth day he will offer the burnt offering of Gad separately, and the burnt offering of Asher separately. And on the sixth day he will offer, and it breaks up, but it would be for Dan and then Naphtali, if you recall, the order that that was given in, which is judgment, and then I believe Naphtali means the gift. So, and this is the part where we have to take time, and I encourage you all, take the list of names here, right? Go over what was covered here, like line them up. I'm sorry, my computer is going a little slow there. There we go. If you can line it up with the account here, you have Louis and Yahudah on day 1, Benjamin and the sons of Yahusuf on day 2, and then I can't remember what they said for day 3, 4, 5, and 6 there. But this one was Dan and Naphtali. This one was Yishakar and Zebulun, I think. So sorry about that, but the point that our brother was trying to make is we can line these up and see how that might be significant, relating it to like our creator's or Yahushua's passion and what he walked out, and how that relates to the creation account timeline, the 22 works that he does in 6 days before the millennial reign. All of those line up together. And I'll give you another example of one that you can study for yourself to prove The Aleph Bet goes along with the 22 works. We've mentioned that before. There is a phenomenon throughout the Tehillim or Psalms called the acoustic Psalms. They line up each verse with the letter of the Aleph Bet, or with Psalm 119, it is 8 verses for every letter. And if you take that letter and you take what's written in that section for it, and you take where that is represented in history, it always matches. It's alluding to something about that work on that day, and it's amazing parallel. Whether it's in regard to the wicked or the righteous, or if you're of him or not of him, it fits that pattern of the Aleph Bet right through the 6 days of creation. And you have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Wah, and Zion the first day, leading that first 1,000 years all the way up to the light of Hanok, the truth being revealed, the cutting off of Adam, and the judgment against Cain, with the evening and morning and different aspects of what light represents, truth, his judgment, right? All of that played out. The second day is the letter Cheth. It was the firmament and the flood is the only things that were done. The third day is the Tikal, like the female head covering, Tet Yod Kaf Lamed. And that represents the separating of the nations, the separating out of Abraham, the promised word that was given, and the things that came from that. Sun, moon, and stars, preaching his death until he came, set up the kingdom, and the children of light running the course set before them. We've covered that one, right? And that was Mem, Noon, and Samik. Then Ayin, Pei, um, Zaudi, I believe that one is. It's the living creature. It's the sea monsters, Leviathan, Behemoth, and the teeming life of the oceans. And then you have Kof, Resh, Shin, Tau. A long reach after this, you have that snap, that snare and trap, but it's the living creatures. The Kof, like a monkey, is literally the Kof. But Resh is the cattle, lines up with the Reformation we've talked about, the ones that are domesticated and trained, that are herded together. Sheen is the creeping creatures, and then Tau is Adam in his likeness and image. So that's all we have for today, however, and I want to thank you for your time. You have a wonderful Sabbath, a great Shavua Tov, a week ahead, and we will talk to you next week. So, shalom.